Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian, and I'm the CEO of the Immigrant Council of Ireland. We're just going to hold on for another couple of minutes to allow a couple of our participants to come in and attendees to join as well. So we'll be with you in 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'll get the ball rolling. We have our moderator has joined us, and we're just waiting for one of the panelists to join, and hopefully she can come along pretty soon. But we will get the ball rolling as we promised to start at 6 o'clock. So my name is Brian Cllr, and I'm the CEO of the Immigrant Council of Ireland. You're very welcome this evening to our seminar and our online panel discussion concerning the Seanad by-election 2022. So the Immigrant Council of Ireland is a national non-governmental organisation that works with migrant communities in Ireland on various topics, including the immigration system, integration issues, and within our integration work, political participation is a massive part of what we do. It's our belief in the Immigrant Council of Ireland that diversity in politics is essential for a healthy democracy and fair decision making. And Ireland has one of the most inclusive electoral systems in the world. Every person, regardless of their nationality, can vote and run in local elections. Whereas ethnic diversity significantly increased at local level, migrant and ethnic minority communities are still lacking representation at the state level. So 1 in 8 of Irish society being a person from a migrant background, that's a significant part of our society that lacks any political representation in the Dáil and in the Seanad. So for a number of years, the Immigrant Council of Ireland has been investing time and resources to support diversity in politics, focusing on migrant and ethnic diversity representation. And on the occasion of the TCD Seanad by-election in 2022, the Immigrant Council is organising this public online panel discussion with 3 candidates who identify as having come from a migrant background themselves. So as a civil society organisation, the Immigrant Council of Ireland is, we're strictly non-partisan. So we're not supporting any particular candidate. The purpose of this event is to provide a forum for discussion to basically explore some of the issues that are very pertinent in Ireland today. So it's really a pleasure for us to be able to do that and to provide an opportunity to talk to the panelists. The session will be recorded, so I just want to give a heads up to the panelists as well that that's happening, and we will share it on our YouTube channel and maybe social media channels as well, so that anybody who didn't get a chance to come along this evening will be able to see it in the future. So the running order for today is, after my brief introduction and welcome of everybody here now, we will have the panel discussion from about 6:15 till about 7:15 or 7:20. There is a chat box down at the bottom, or sorry, a Q&A box, I should say, where if anybody wants to put in any questions, they're more than welcome to do so. And we will have a look at the questions towards the end of the panel, and we will ask our moderator to send those or to pose those questions to the panel, and then we will aim to be finishing up around 7:30 this evening. So thank you all for joining us, like I say. So to introduce you to our three panelists, and I think our three panelists are here. Yeah, we have everybody in the room, so that's fantastic. So the first person to introduce you to is Ryan Alberto Ogieboon. Ryan grew up in an Irish-Mexican family in the small village of Camas in the west of Ireland, in the Connemara Gaeltacht, and studied sociology and social policy in Trinity College Dublin for his undergraduate degree. And is currently completing his PhD in sociology in Trinity. His PhD research primarily focuses on the development and causes of socio-economic inequalities in education, paying particular attention to the effect of the family stressors on child outcomes and the negative repercussions of poverty on child development. So I think that sentence might be about half your PhD, actually, Ryan. It's a fairly long one. So that's you're very welcome, Ryan. Good to have you here. The second person to introduce you to is Abbas Ali O'Shea. So Abbas previously stood as a candidate in the 2020 Seanad election. His primary focus, as described by his bio, is the profile of Irish education, both for Irish and EU residents and citizens who use the great and important services we have in Ireland already. Also, as a significant Irish export, education to increase Ireland's profile and impact internationally. So the third candidate we have for this afternoon, or this evening I should say, is Cllr Hazel Chu. So Hazel was born in Dublin. Hazel's parents came to Ireland from Hong Kong in the 1970s due to the recession there at the time. She trained as a barrister at King's Inn, and while studying worked as a fundraising consultant for non-profits and a production manager at music events. She then went on to travel to Sydney and Hong Kong and New York, and also worked as in Diageo as their head of brand, corporate and trade communications. She became a councillor in 2019, and in June 2020, Hazel was elected as the 352nd Lord Mayor of Dublin City. And one last person to introduce you to this afternoon or this evening as well, and I'm just going to pull up her bio here as well. Our moderator for this evening. We're very, very happy to have Gabija Gataveckaite, and I hope I pronounced that right, Gabi. Gabi is a news reporter at Independent, Independent.ie, or the Irish Independent, and with the Herald. Gabija covers breaking news and current affairs, originally from Lithuania and living in Ireland for over a decade. She also writes occasional features and comment pieces, and she was named Journalist of the Year at the 2019 National Student Media Awards, and is a DCU journalism graduate. So we're absolutely delighted to have Gabi joining us this evening as well. I keep saying that. Many of you will have heard her on the airwaves as well, I think on various shows over the last number of weeks and months as well. So it's absolutely fantastic to have her here as our moderator this evening. So I am going to pass over to our moderator, and she is going to begin the conversation with the panelists. So thank you all again for joining us, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Gabi for being moderator as well. And I'll come back in at the end to give a quick wrap up. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to mute myself.
Thanks a million for those lovely words, Brian. It's brilliant to be here this evening. And it's very exciting, I suppose, to be doing something on a migrant scale. It's an issue, I think, that you know, sometimes I think Ireland now is so diverse, and so I think it's really important to shine a light on that diversity. So I'm just going to kick off, if that's all right. And I'm going to just have a few general questions, I have a few specific questions, and we'll see how we get on. I've loads of questions for you, of course, I'm a journalist, so I've got loads of things to be asking you. So first of all, and I suppose maybe we might start off with just the way you are there, maybe Ryan, you know, and this is a question for everybody, does your background influence you as a politician, and if so, how?
I suppose, you know, it's effectively part of my identity. I am Irish, but I'm also Irish Mexican. So it naturally has, because I grew up in a multicultural background, it's naturally shaped me and my values and how I approach things. But at the end of the day, I did grow up in Ireland. So I feel there's probably, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm, you know, the most migrant of candidates, but in terms of informing my policy and informing how I approach politics, I think we need to approach it with the realization that not everyone has had the same background. Not everyone has, for instance, there are different types of capital, like human capital here, and people aren't necessarily going to be able to avail of the same resources, such as, you know, prior generations having picked up the experience of how to negotiate different aspects of society in Ireland. And that's necessarily, we need to tackle these inequalities effectively. And that's something I want to look at in politics.
Okay, and maybe we'll come to Hazel.
Sorry, apologies. I'm not actually in my house. I was in the middle of canvassing and ran into a friend's house to come and do the call. I didn't quite make it back home. So hello, everyone. And hi, Gabby. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Ali. I just want to say a big thank you to the Immigrant Council for setting this up. For me, it's very clear on how the ties of my family's heritage and culture, and coming from a migrant background, how it ties into politics and how it should tie into politics. We're 12% migrants in Ireland at the moment, and we may actually be increasing, dependent on how the next couple of weeks and months go in relation to the intake we have from people who need our help from Ukraine and different countries. And for 12% migrants, we have less than, I think, 1% representation in politics, which is maybe actually 1%, give or take, including the local authorities as well. And that is not representative of politics, and we need to do better by that, because if you want a progressive changing society, then you need people at the table that represents overall public. So from where I come from, it's about making sure we put as many people from every background and diversity as possible into politics.
Okay, and welcome to Abbas Ali.
Hi, Gabby. Thank you very much for having us today and organize this webinar and to express ourselves. And hi, Ryan. Hi, Hazel. Hello, everybody. Actually, I'm originally from Iraq. I grew up with the family who work in the politics. My father and worked in the previous regime in Iraq, and before the last war, 2003, we was living in Iraq. And I actually, when I'm a child, I remember when I'm just like start memorize things. I remember things. I can see my father, how his influence in the government and his position. From that time, I have like a kind of feeling that's kind of job, or that's I kind of felt it's really, I like it. I have to stick with it because it can express about myself and about exactly about that I can provide services and help for people who need it. And then I moved to Ireland over the 17, 18 years, and then I came as a refugee, and then I got citizenship. I married from Irish lady. That's why we have O'Shea after my surname. We have both names, my name, my family name, and her family name. And I'm a father for 3 kids, and I'm really excited for this time. This is the second time for me for an election after the first time in 2020. And at that time was actually, that's not good. That's a great time based on the pandemic, what happened, and that will affect exactly about the participant electors, how they vote for this election. And hopefully this time we can we can make it happen, and hopefully we have a lot of people who participate in this election. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's a really good way to start. So I might go ahead and move on to the next question. Will migrant rights be one of the key issues for you if you are elected? And I might maybe go to Ryan again.
Well, I suppose we're looking also at Trinity College Dublin. So the electorate for this Seanad by-election is probably not necessarily representative of Ireland as a country. And as Hazel pointed out, we have a very large immigrant population within the country, but that's not necessarily represented in Seanad elections for university panels, both in Trinity and the NUI panel. So I think it's important that even though immigrants aren't necessarily in a position very often to vote in these elections, that there is representation for them. So there are two elements. There's obviously we have a very large immigrant population in Ireland, and it's how to ensure that they're integrated and felt welcome in the country. But also I think we need to look also at the refugee population and how we deal with, in particular, asylum seekers. I think we have a long history of saying that, realizing that the direct provision system isn't fair and it isn't fit for purpose. We're effectively incarcerating people with no even like an end date for people. Some people are in direct provision system for up to 7 years, and we're telling them we'll get to you eventually, and we're not even telling you what we're going to do at the end. We could decide that you can stay in the country. We could very easily decide that you need to be moved, and this is not necessarily even just moved from the country, but also moved around the country. So they aren't necessarily in a position to set down roots, to feel integrated in the community, because they're just being moved around. So I think this is something that needs to be raised, for instance, in the Seanad, and it's something that I have advocated for a while. So this is, for instance, one area that I would like to advocate in this campaign.
And if we go to Hazel. You might have to just unmute yourself. Okay, I'll give you a minute, Hazel. I'll go to Abbas Ali.
Actually, based on my experience here in Ireland, I was able to represent my people from other countries at that time, and I succeeded to make kind of delegation of the content for the all Muslim and non-Muslim from Middle East and Arabic countries and Asian, and to represent them, and we take them to the funeral party, and we sit down with that time with the in the door and to discuss about a lot of issues we're facing the minority communities in Ireland. As you know, so far I think we over 100,000 from Muslim and non-Muslim people who live in Ireland, and unfortunately they don't have a representative from them in the government. That's why we're hoping at this time by one of the immigrant people, one of the people who is even me, Hazel or Ryan, who can win that seat, would be great, who can represent these people and to make to give them chance to reach their voice to the government people and to the decision maker, and to put them and always look after themselves and look after them to check exactly what they need and what's and we can discuss how they live and what's the difficulty they face in their life here in Ireland. That's actually one of my priority, one of my important things that would make me to go ahead with the second time with this election.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Hazel, if you're ready.
I can unmute now. Sorry about that, Gabby. I don't think it can be anything else but important issue. As I just said there, that it's 12% migrants in the country, that we are not representative. We can see it even with gender bias as well, in that we're 50% women, but we only have 22% in the Dáil that's female representative. In the Seanad, it's 35%. In minority case, it's again less than 1% in the Oireachtas. So it comes back to the fact that you don't have the right representation at the table to make decisions that will affect migrants. You look at Eileen Flynn today, and she's in the Dáil. She's presenting as chair of the Travellers Working Group, and she's presenting very concrete resolutions and proposals, and that's because she has that lived experience. And we all here, between myself, Ryan, Abbas, we have that lived experience, and yourself as well, Gabby, of how it feels like to have that heritage, to have that discrimination, but to have that wanting of progress and improvement. And I've had a very good track record as Lord Mayor. I was the first Lord Mayor ever to set up and be part of an intercultural and integration forum. I worked with the UN migration committee to form the first ever Dublin UN migration forum that is coming up along the tracks. And what I've learned working with various committees and groups such as the Immigrant Council of Ireland, such as INAR, is that there is multiple things that we need to start doing when it comes to integration and inclusion. So it's not just integration for the sake of integration. I look at my mother, who came here 45, 50 years ago, and she never really integrated, but she wanted more to feel included. So there is a difference there that we need to be conscious of when it comes to people's various cultures. And when we look at legislation, what we can do, that what we need to push for in the Seanad especially is policy and legislation that will build the basis of good inclusion. So good inclusion means referendum for housing, making sure everyone has a home. Good inclusion means proper educational services across the board and proper translation services to help those who are in migrant communities. I also set up a homeless task force, the first Lord Mayor ever to. And what I've noticed within that is the issue that migrants have when it comes to homelessness and the lack of translation services. So those are things that are concrete solutions I'm proposing we bring forward to the Seanad to set forward as a bill, as policy that we can start pushing now.
Okay, thank you. And of course, you're all running for a seat on the Seanad, which has been criticised many times for being an elitist institution. And of course, you know, the seat that you're running for is a university seat as well. What are your views on that? Do you agree with that? And do you agree that the Seanad ultimately needs reform? I might start with Abbas this time.
Sorry, Gabby, can you just repeat the question? I just lost the connection. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So the seat that you're running for is a university seat on the Seanad, and the Seanad has been criticised for being an elitist institution. You know, especially, for example, you know, it's only a Dublin University graduates that can vote for you. Do you agree that the Seanad is elitist, and do you agree that it needs to be reformed, or maybe you have a different view altogether? Oh, I think we might have lost him.
Sorry, I don't know what's happened. Yeah, sorry, I'm back. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry. Sorry for that, Gabby.
Are you okay?
Sorry. Yeah, no, okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry, do you want me to repeat the question one more time? Or?
Please, yes, please.
Yeah, sorry, so the Seanad has been criticised for being an elitist institution, and I'm just looking to see your views on that and if you think it needs to be reformed.
Yeah, actually, yes. I agree. One of my opinion here, I think it's fair, like these 3 seats for the TCD could be open for the all Irish institution, not just for the Trinities. That's one of my view. That's why I'm thinking about that for fair to make to make it like to open it for the all graduates from Ireland. That will make it strong and to give a lot of profile people who represented and diversity in the Seanad. So I believe that's the 3 seats. It should be for Trinity. Yes, we can use them for Trinity, of course, to keep them this 3 seats for Trinity. But to vote for these 3 seats would be, I think, it make it more sense and make it more stronger, make it more like a kind of appropriate situation, and to reflect from the all institute, from the all graduate in Ireland, rather than just from one institution. That's why one of more things I'm focusing on it. And if I elected, I'm going to discuss that in the Seanad.
Okay, and maybe I might go to Hazel this time.
Yeah, I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot by saying this, but yeah, it is elitist. It is. I'm sorry, but let's call this spade a spade. The Trinity graduates I've spoken to have said that it's elitist and that they would like to see it more inclusive. And the ones that I have spoken to in other colleges have said the same. And when you have a system that one person can appoint 12 people to a house that is democratic, so then it's not very democratic at all. So the whole system itself needs to be reformed. And I know Senator David Norris have put in bills for that, and also the other senators in the CEG group as well. And those are foundation stones we need to build on, because I think if you ask Trinity graduates, as much as they want to keep their vote, they will also want to make sure others have a vote as well, because it is past the time, like, and this is the thing about Trinity, it's about progression. Back in 20s, I say, before 20s, there was no woman allowed to be in the college. Now a woman runs the college. And same with the Seanad seat. When you have it set that only a particular group can vote, many now, being progressive, have said they want to open up. So I think what we need to do is to look at the overall system of the upper house, find out, start determining what exactly is the role and purpose of it, and then reform its structures of it. But yes, absolutely. And that's something I would like to do in this very short 2.5 years term. Thanks.
And Ryan, please.
Yes, I mean, I do think there's an appetite for reform. I mean, very much so. We actually voted on this in 1979. We had a referendum, and it was overwhelmingly passed that the vote should be extended to all university graduates from all different institutions. It hasn't been enacted by the lower house. This is not an issue of the upper house, but there is naturally a public appetite, and the citizens of this country have expressed that. We just need to put pressure on the government to actually enact what was asked for by the electorate. I do think we need to look at Seanad and what does it provide. I know we had also another referendum in 2013, and it was just viewed as, let's just abolish it. And people voted against abolishing it because we were promised reform. And since then, there hasn't really been any conversation about reform. People within the Seanad are asking for reform. The people voted for reform, but again, it hasn't been enacted. So what's the view that we want to have for the Seanad? What role does the Seanad need? Firstly, I think the Seanad needs to be viewed as quite different from the Dáil. It's not a stepping stone to the Dáil. It's not a way of a political platform. Rather, it provides maybe a platform for a more strategic vision for this country. So while the Dáil is perhaps more so politicians dealing with the very essence of day-to-day running of a country, the Seanad can be a collection of experts in different fields who are outlining a vision of how to tackle the long-term issues of this country. So that can be, for instance, education, that can be climate, that can be a whole range of different issues, finance as well. And this is effectively a way of, we can scrutinize the legislation that's coming from the lower house, but we can also propose legislation that then people in the lower house can enact on. And we have a long history within the Seanad, within Trinity, but also within the other panels of very effective, I mean, the powers of the Seanad are quite limited, but we have had very effective members of the Seanad. I mean, Mary Robbins and David Norris, naturally. These people have, through the position that has been given to them in the Seanad, have been able to advocate for changes that maybe the Dáil didn't think was relevant at that time, but because of pressure from the upper house, they were able to get these things down the line, either through referendums or through legislation in the lower house. So I think it's very important. I think we need to maintain the Seanad. And in terms of extending the voting rights of the Seanad, this is something we actually can do right away. It can be started right away. The referendum has been passed for it. It just needs to be enacted.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting.
Can I add one point, if it's possible? So, sure. And as I agree with Ryan about everything what you said with the Hazel, of course, and in order for the Seanad, actually, for the upper house, we need to give the upper house. They need more effect, all in the government, not just like they're gonna delay or accept or bills will be raised by the lower house. So that's the Seanad. I think the Seanad, and we need to get more. Need to be like be active more in the government, to be like be part of the decision maker as well, not just people like sit down, discuss bills, and they agree or not, they disagree. what being raised from the lower house. So definitely I agree with Ryan and Hazel about this, and hopefully who will be elected who can raise this bill and to give more power, more strength for the Seanad.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting to hear your views, given that you are, and it's interesting that you all kind of have broadly a similar view, even though you are running for a seat on the Seanad. I have a few questions just directed at each of the candidates. Ryan, I might go back to you if that's all right. So just kind of having done a little bit of research on your background, you have extensive academic experience. What is it about that experience that makes you suitable to be a politician?
I think we should look at, basically, there's a kind of traditional politician and perhaps a new way of politics, and I'm hoping to kind of advocate for a new way of politics, where it's not so much premised on the individual, but it's rather premised on presentation of empirical evidence to back policy. So, and this is something that I think is more so suited to the Seanad maybe than the Dáil, is that we in the Seanad you are given a platform in which you can provide not just sound bites, but hopefully a more detailed academically in integrity policy. And so that's obviously I'm focused on education and education inequalities. Is what I've done my PhD in, is what I work in. But I think a reliance on empirical research should be covering all types of policy. So we shouldn't do policy just solely on the premise of this sounds like the right idea. For instance, I think we're very, in our public and political debate, we are very, we focus a lot on the outcomes. So we focus very much on something that happens and we can see it's wrong. And we're like, we need to tackle this. But these outcomes are the result of a whole process. And we need to look at how we can tackle these processes as opposed to trying to tackle the outcomes, trying to stop these outcomes from emerging in the first place. And this is where empirical research can work, both in the environment and education and in the economy. So that's where I hope to bring this attitude towards the Seanad, not necessarily just working on my own, because obviously my research experience is in a specific field, but also working with other people with different experiences and bringing up an empirically sound political approach.
Okay, thank you. I might go to Hazel, if that's all right. Hazel, you've run many times for Seanad or Dáil seats. Do you think that it's difficult to persuade the electorate that you're not just in the running for a seat, any seat?
Sorry, I thought there was, you were going to go on for a bit longer in the question. No, I don't think it is. Like I ran for a seat and I got the highest percentage vote of any candidate ever in 2019, and I then became Lord Mayor of the city. So it's not a case that, oh, I kept on running and people kept on shooting me down. You run because you want to participate. You run because you want to show the next generation that there is proper representation, and you run because you want to change things. So there are sometimes you run and you fall flat on your face, like I did last year. So, or you run internally and don't get chosen, but that doesn't mean you stop. So, and I really hope that Ryan and Abbas and every other of the 15 other candidates will continue running in one way, shape or form, because we need good representation in the city. Does this mean, to the part of your question that asks, does the electorate see me as someone that just keeps on running and is eager to just get a seat? I can tell you, politics isn't that glamorous. So like people might think, oh, you get a seat and you go in there and you do nothing. I spent my last year as Lord Mayor working 60-hour weeks and being bounced from meeting to meeting and crisis managing the city. And I know politicians, including my other half, who's in the Dáil, who were working flat out and getting a lot of crap for working flat out as well, but also getting a lot of love because they were representing the public. And that's the job. It as much as people think it's a great job, it is an honor and a privilege, but it comes with a lot of flack as well. And to think that you should be doing that, to think that you want to serve the public and put yourself in that position of serving the public, it does take a lot of thought behind it. You don't just go, oh, I'll just go for that. And I think a lot of the voters do see that. Some voters will go, you know what, Hazel Chu, she just runs for everything and she always runs no matter what and she just wants to get in there. Other voters I've spoken to have said, you know what, fair play to you. Keep on doing it. Keep on trucking along. Maybe you get in there one day and maybe we'll have better representation. And that's what you want. So.
Okay. And just to come to Abbas, you claim in your Twitter bio that you are a representative of minority communities in Ireland. Can I ask you, what is this based on and what work is it that you have done?
That's exactly what happened in 2018. I succeeded to gather all the Muslim leaders here in Ireland from north to south of Ireland, and all together with all leaders and all the secular people as well. And we went to meet the politics people and the door, and we spoke to them. And we raised a lot of questions about that. How come the over 120,000 people who live in Ireland, Muslim, they never even participate in each election, the local council, the TD's council or the president council, because they never been involved in that things. They never been asked. They never been acknowledged. They never been told. Never been. In fact, there is a disconnect between the minorities and the politics people, or we never saw them, and that's why we felt like we let down, and there's no representative of minorities here in Ireland, and there's no one talk to us, no one ask us, no one encourage us, no one ask us, okay guys, there's an election here coming for 2019 or 2020, or for the councillor, for European Parliament, for the TDs, and even people here, I believe minorities, they don't have this kind of more information about this system, how they register, how they be able to join this election, how they represent themselves. So that's why I started talking to all leaders, Muslim leaders here in Ireland, and then thanks God I be able to convince them, and we sit down together and we put a list of things that we facing, the difficulties that we facing here in Ireland, and we raise them to the decision maker and for the politics people here in Dublin in 2019, and we get a lot of promises, and they start to register and they start logging, and thanks God the system has been changed. Before it was using paperwork, and they have to go to the Guardian, and a lot kind of procedure, but now it became online things to make it easier for them. So we from this point we start able to give them more lots like kind of tutorial or messages for all Muslims, how to register, how to be part of this, because that's your right to vote and to express your right by voting for X or Y or Z for each election. So that's exactly from that point, and people, they think that's the best things to do, is to be part of the community, not just to be side of the community. Since when we live here in Ireland, we are the part of the society. We need to represent ourselves. We need to say, guys, we are here. We have a vote. We have a right. We can say yes. We can say no. So from that point, we get good response. Actually, we get very good response since 2019 until now, and we hope now we continue for this election and next election.
Thank you. I just have another, I'm going to go back to doing one question for everybody. This is actually coming in from one of our viewers here. It's a very good question, actually. Would you support extending voting rights in general elections to migrants, even those without an Irish passport, once they meet certain requirements of the length of time living in Ireland? I'm a perfect example of that, because I've lived here for over 15 years, but I don't have a citizenship and I can't vote. So I might go to maybe Ryan first of all.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think it's a good question. And yeah, I think it should be extended for the reason that you mightn't have a citizenship, but this is obviously, you're a stakeholder in this country by now. And the policies that are voted on and the policies that are introduced are going to be affecting the lives of people who have made this a home. And so I don't think it's correct to withhold voting on these issues, because they are now stakeholders in this country. So now I would support voting rights once a certain amount of time has been spent in the country. I don't think it's necessarily somebody coming in, but once it's clear that they are a stakeholder in this country, I think voting rights should be extended.
Just out of interest, what length of time do you think needs to pass?
I think we can look at, for instance, what would be, I believe it's about 5 years for what would be a citizenship, or about that time. I think that's probably a long enough period of time. We can look at in and around that range. It's enough time to make sure that you're a stakeholder in a country.
Okay, and just Hazel?
Yeah, I think if we allow migrants and other communities to come and vote in our local elections, there shouldn't be any difference for general elections. The arguments that are presented for a general election aren't valid insofar that your locals in general, or they're both electing representatives that represent you, so in either a local authority or a national government. So for me, it's very simple. To Ryan's point, there should be a time. 5 years sounds very reasonable in terms of stating how you are connected to the country. And for me, it could be other ways, be it either a time of 5 years or a connection of how you're connected. So if people have children going to school, if people are here working within an environment that was connected already, but they only came over here in the last couple of years, but they've been connected through the country through different ways, that should be assessed. So there needs to be a proper assessment of how, and the criteria is drawn out, and then people should be allowed to vote. I know Teresa had put out there that even if they don't have a passport, should they be allowed? Yeah, listen, we've just opened up the undocumented migrants program, which hopefully will give people that status that they've been fighting for so long. And we have so many that are what I call kind of hidden migrants in this country that are propping up the country, propping up the systems. They work from everywhere, from services to healthcare, and those people deserve a vote, because at the end of the day, if your government, I'm not saying they are, by the way, in case anyone freaks out, but if any government ends up imposing cuts on services, cuts on extra taxes, those people are the ones that are directly affected. So why shouldn't they be allowed to vote? And even if they don't have a passport, yes, as long as they're determined that they have a connection through either a time period or some other significant connection, then they should be allowed to vote.
And just finally, Abbas, the same question.
I think, in my opinion, I think I have different opinion here, a different approach about this issue. I believe each person who live in Ireland in legal way, he has a PPS number and he registered. So definitely he has a need. He or she has a need. So they need to present it. They have this right to vote for the people who can represent them, regardless to wait 5 years to get the citizenship or nationalities to be allowed to be entitled to vote for the council or general election. I think it's any person who live in Ireland in legal way, which is he or she has a PPS number and they registered and they pay tax and they have a work. Regardless of how many years they live in the country, they be allowed to vote or to participate in the election.
Thank you. Another question for everybody. Will you leave your current jobs and focus on being a full-time senator if you are elected? I might go to Hazel first.
Yep, I think you need to. So I know people who do well in multitasking, but for me, there's a very key focus here. The seat has been vacant for 8.5 months at this stage. There's only approximately 2.5 terms left of this government. I'm looking at a max kind of 2.5. So you have a very short window to perform this duty, and you have to hit the ground running. So whatever you're doing, you need to be able to focus 100%. So for me, it's getting in there, hitting the ground running, and making sure there's no other distractions.
Okay, and maybe go to Abbas again.
For me, I actually, I'm going to have both because my job at the moment, I'm doing kind of promoting Irish education abroad. So that's going to help me, of course, within my role in the channel. They're going to be giving me more contact, more delivering more information from overseas to this channel to Iran. So I think I'm going to be doing both jobs.
Are you going to have time to do everything?
Actually, at the moment, I don't have time. I have my baby here with me. But in the future, of course, I will manage that out with that things. I organize I found the needs of what's exactly we need to be internal, what exactly need to be external, what's my plan for the next step, where should we go, where should we promote Irish education? Because I think it's much important to add the value to the Irish CV for all the Irish students who graduate from Ireland when they try to find a job for anywhere in the world, and their qualification, they being kind of not that now internationally globally known. So my role is to promote the Irish institution all over the world, and especially in the Gulf country in GCC. They try to bring more students from there to here, and that's what definitely they're going to reflect to the revenue here in Ireland. So from this experience between the abroad and here, that I think that's going to give great results.
Okay, and Ryan?
Yeah, so I'm currently completing my PhD, so I'm submitting my PhD this month. So by the end of the election, the thesis will have gone, so I won't be holding on to that. And I also work as a researcher in the School of Education in UCD, and naturally that's a full-time position as well. So I wouldn't be able to hold that while also being a senator. But I would want to keep an element of research. I think I need to be. I research education, and I think grounding policy in research is very important. So it's not necessarily that I'm going to do all the research in terms of policy that I'm proposing, but I want to be grounded in terms of writing papers and whatnot. Yeah.
Very good. I suppose maybe to stick to something that's a bit more timely. Of course, we have this, horrendous war in Ukraine. What do you think the Irish government can do to help? And maybe leading off on that, maybe it's a separate question, but of course, Ireland's position as neutrality comes into play there as well. I would just be interested in getting your views as to what really Ireland should be doing. I might kick off with Hazel again.
Yeah, it's definitely one that someone had said yesterday, I think on the late debate, that we should have a citizens' assembly on it. We first and foremost need a citizens' assembly on drugs, but then it wouldn't be bad to actually have one on neutrality, because I think historically what we view as neutrality has forever changed. So it's changed through the times, because if you even look at Ireland and how we have a seat on the Security Council, that's something wouldn't be, I think when we originally thought of Ireland's position of neutrality would be something we would have gone for. But there is a differentiation that we need to start having on. Just because you adopt a neutral position doesn't mean that you don't support. So neutrality means you don't interfere or get involved, but it does mean you still support in whatever way you can, be it through aid, be it through sanctions. So, and those are things that we need to continue in terms of supporting Ukraine. I met a Ukrainian ambassador the other day, and it was very clear that her thing was, listen, we want certain things from this government to stand by, and there were sanctions, there were stopping ships in port for people, for the public. She thanked everyone, but she said, listen, if you want to send money, etc., don't send other items. But then on the item of neutrality, she gets it as well, and so does everyone else. But neutrality also means you can be strong in your stance. You can support those who are being oppressed. You just don't necessarily have to take up their arms to do so. But that seems to be a few that's differing in the country. So I would like to definitely propose a citizens' assembly on it in future, because I do think we need to trash this one out properly.
I might go to Abbas.
I think there's one, in my opinion, I believe, one of the most important things the diplomatic way, dialogue, and to sit down with the Russian people, with the Russian regime, to find out why this war happened in the first place, and try to understand the situation and control the situation more than escalate it, and support the help with the money or weapons for Ukrainian. That's kind of it's make the situation very dangerous, and to keep the place, it's a very dangerous, and actually it doesn't help in the right way. So I believe the best way is to do that kind of a dialogue one, by the diplomatic one. Keep talking with them, sit down with them. I didn't heard any like kind of delegation, high level delegation went to fly to Moscow and sit down with the Russian regime to discuss that. All the media or all meeting or all council, they sit down now, try to say that's which is agreed. We all agree that's not good. There's no way to support or to say okay or to justify that war. It's all a mistake. It's wrong. But we need to find out why, and we need to find a solution for how to stop that war, rather than to escalate the war for no end.
So just on neutrality, you're happy to keep neutrality as it is, and
I think it's much better to suggest to ask for request consist any delegation, and to be there in Moscow and to discuss that with them, and that's going to be helpful. That's going to be a lot. You went face-to-face meeting rather than by media or by the social media or by the third channels.
Okay. Thank you. And just Ryan.
Yes, I think, when we see the images and we see the suffering that's happening in Ukraine, it's, everyone is asking themselves, like, what can we as a country do to help this? So, and obviously that's complicated by our neutrality, because, well, technically we're militarily non-aligned, I believe is the correct term. And I think what we need to ask is, what's the most effective way we can assist in this situation? So we're not a hard power. We don't have a massive military. So even if we really wanted to help out militarily, we're not really in a position to do. And the EU has said, like, we can assist in other non-lethal ways. And I think we should definitely take that up, because this is assistance that the people of Ukraine also need. It's not just military assistance, they also need this. In relation to what we can do as a country besides this, we're not a hard power. We don't have a large military, but as Hazel mentioned, we are on the Security Council. I would disagree actually with Hazel a little bit there. I think we are on the Security Council and it should be enhanced because we are a neutral country. So we have some kind of gravitas. I remember there was an article in The Economist last year that pointed out that Ireland doesn't have a large military, but in many ways it's a bit of a soft power, because given the situation that we're not in NATO, we're not in these groups, we can kind of say we're not aligned to anyone and we're just trying to speak as a clear head here. That is not to say that well, personally for Ireland, I think we should stay neutral. I'm not saying this is a criticism for countries like Ukraine trying to join NATO. I think their reality is very, very different to our reality. They were doing this also as a way of saying, we need this protection, we need this alignment with other countries. So I'm not going to be going around and saying they heaped it upon themselves, because I think that is inappropriate. I think this was a clear one aggressor in this conflict.
I just had an idea. I just picked up on Hazel's point there on the Citizens' Assembly. It's quite an interesting point. I guess there's an argument to be made for and against citizens' assemblies. I think, Hazel, you said there needs to be one on drugs first before anything else. I might ask maybe Hazel to elaborate a little bit on that, and I might come to the other panelists, that if we do were to put in place a citizens' assembly, do you agree that it should be on drugs? Is that the biggest issue facing the country, or maybe are there other issues that we might focus on? So I might just go to Hazel first.
Okay, so drugs is one of the biggest ones. I can see, I look at Senator Lynn Moran's research and other various research on the subject, and I guess I would have grown up in Fairhouse, where, not that it was prevalent, but I do know many people who I wish there was more that was done in terms of harm reduction, in terms of the overall subject of drugs. People are dying from drugs. So, and from the Homeless Task Force, I can see that there is a direct connection of what we can do when it comes to, again, our drug policy. So that is why it's important, because the Ryan had said earlier about evidence, and what we deliver in terms of policy and bills and legislation needs to be evidential based. And there is evidence there that we need to start tackling drugs in the country and deliver proper policy. And to do that, we need a proper discussion on it. And this is why the Citizens Assembly is so important on it. And I think that needs to be this government's priority. The directly elected mayor I had pushed for when I was mayor, so I agree, and biodiversity because there's a climate crisis, but first and foremost, drugs, then the others. But I would also, not that I think we should be having citizen assemblies left, right, and center, but while you're having them, and there is already the embedded cost there of delivering two, why not have them at the same time in terms of operations, and have one on neutrality, whether this country shall still remain neutral, or what kind of neutrality shall it be. The other one is on racism, because we're talking about migrants' rights here. We're talking about this, how we want better representation, but there is a growing cohort of a small minority of people that uses the issues of this country, be it homelessness, be it pandemic, be it anything else, and blame it on migrants. So we need a very open conversation on racism. And I think we should embed that into a citizen assembly. So.
Okay, I might go to Ryan. You know, what do you think would be the priority for a citizens' assembly? Do you agree that it should be drugs, or should be something else?
Well, I think it's already been decided that we're going to have two citizens' assemblies, one on drugs and one on biodiversity. So that's it's coming down the line anyhow. I mean, obviously, these are issues that need to be discussed, and it has already been agreed as citizens' assembly. I think my question more so is how effective are citizens' assemblies in addressing these issues? Of course, they need to be spoken about, but in many ways, the Seanad is a citizens' assembly. This is a place where these things need to be discussed, that maybe they won't be discussed in as much detail in the lower house, but they can be in the upper house. And the reason why I mentioned this and why I question how effective the citizens' assemblies have been is obviously we've seen in previous referendums that have come through the citizens' assembly that they have been effective in that way. But there have also been citizens' assemblies since then where proposals have been put forward and the government has said, thank you very much, but they haven't actually enacted it. And there's nobody obviously in the Citizens' Assembly to question that anymore because it's dissolved. Whereas with the Seanad, you have people who can debate things, who can put forward proposals and put forward legislation to be enacted by the lower house. And then if it's not enacted, they're still there and they're still in a platform to say, look, this is still an issue. This is how we address it. So in many ways, I look at citizens' assemblies and I think this is a nice way of saying we're engaging with an issue, but they're not necessarily, there's no commitment to saying we are going to act on the findings of these assemblies, and that can be an issue.
And just Abbas Ali, please.
That's exactly what I agree with Ryan about this point, because we need to give more power for the Seanad position, because now we're not just like here to debate or to discuss about the bills raised by the lower house. So by adding more power to the Seanad by lower house, upper house, that would be make them more challenge, going to be more active, going to be more attractive between the two houses. Not just like you, okay, we have a discussion and we need to discuss it, and what do you think about it? Why we can, all we can do delay it, or we agree it, or that's it, we can cancel it. That's the point, is we need to, the Seanad reform to be, that's the first priority for anyone who's going to be elected from the 17. To give more power, to give more, to put them in the right place to discuss that with the government, with the decision maker. That will definitely going to help. Definitely going to help.
Okay. Again, I suppose.
Gabby, can I just come back on one thing, just very quickly? The reason why CAs or Citizens' Assembly is important, and I get Ryan and Abbas's point about how Seanad can be that democratic form, but we just had the point here much earlier on about whether the Seanad is currently elitist and whether it only has a certain subsection of society. So within it, voting within it and running within it. So if your Seanad, your upper house, which is supposed to be this democratic system, is supposed to be deciding these issues instead of citizen assembly, you are again taking away the power from the public and the decision making from the public yet once more. And it does not make it any more democratic, nor does it make the results of your findings any more democratic, because again, you're being decided by one group of people who weren't elected through a democratic system. So this comes back to why a citizen assembly, though hindrance in so many ways, doesn't work as well as it should, it still encompasses the majority of civil society. Thanks.
If I could add on that point as well, I fully agree. I think we know that that perhaps the Seanad isn't necessarily representative of the general population as Citizens Assembly can be. The question I would have about the Citizens Assembly is there is no mandate on the government to accept what has been put forward by the Citizens Assembly, and the government isn't necessarily representative of the broader society either. And this is of all sides of the divide. I'm looking, there's the situation now where we're seeing like Alan Kelly is going to be replaced most likely by Ivana Bacik as party leader, and suddenly we're seeing a situation where the leaders of 4 left or left of centre parties, the Green Party, Labour, Sinn Féin, and People Before Profit, they're all being led by people from Dublin who went to private schools. It's a very small segment of society. And I think we have to question whether politics is really a reflection of the general society as a whole, or is it that there's a certain segment of society, not to say that they're bad leaders per se, or that they shouldn't be going for politics, but that they're more readily able to get into politics. So if we're still leaving the Citizens Assembly is only as strong as the people who are going to actually enact the findings of the Citizens Assembly. And at present, that's not representative of general society either.
Okay, thank you. Just trying to stick to topical issues as we come towards the end. Obviously, we've got International Women's Day this weekend. I suppose, would that be, a priority for you if you were to win the seat? And, what can be done to improve the situation? I might start with Abbas Ali. Sorry, I think you're on mute, Abbas.
Yeah, sorry. Right. Could you just repeat the question, please?
Yeah, no problem. Please. Just ahead of International Women's Day, would women's issues be a priority for you, and what can be done to, I suppose, make women's lives better?
Yeah, that's very important topic actually. By keep the women engaged with the society, all sectors, not just for politics, all sectors. When we have the women participate in society, of course they're going to give her more, but she's going to participate in the society, going to express herself, we're going to be defense about she's going to by saying exactly her role or her position in the society, going to reflect it on the society as well by health sector, by education sector, by politics sector, like Hazel when she was a minor. That would be great. That would be add a lot to the variety, to add more voice and to a different voice, not just like just all going to be one gender. It has to be mixed and has going to be get more different opinion. They're going to be more. Actually, I think the best things to do by keep, increase, support, and encourage women to participate in all sectors in Ireland, not just for politics.
Okay, and I might go to Ryan.
Yes, no, I mean, I think Hazel pointed out like that there was, as a proportion of the population, women aren't in any way, there isn't an adequate representation of women in, for instance, government or in other areas of policy. And I think, again, kind of going back to the point I was making earlier, we can look at the outcome and we can say, okay, this is highly unequal. I think the question is, where do these inequalities come and what do they reflect? Is it that we just don't want to vote for women? Or is it the fact that perhaps women are in a position or they don't feel they are in a position to run, and why is that? And I think we can look at, for instance, even in terms of childcare and all these sort of areas, these are things that are limiting families or people in families running for politics and whatnot, but also who is taking up that family role. And there's a lot of literature showing that there's a kind of second shift taken up by women. So even if women are working, they still have the home task, and that task is disproportionately taken up by women. And how can we facilitate this? So one of the things obviously is in terms of childcare. Childcare is very important, not only in terms of ensuring that women can participate in work and for instance, in politics, but also it actually has very strong educational benefits, especially, I mean, it's quite relevant to this conversation, especially to children from migrant backgrounds who maybe don't have the language skills developing at home. There was actually a very interesting presentation by the ESRI today, finding exactly that children from migrant backgrounds who didn't have access to preschool struggled in school, in primary school, and there were major gaps. So I think we need to look at this in the conversation as well. One thing that can provide a solution in improving equality in one outcome, for instance, in gender equality, can also have improving outcomes in another thing, for instance, the performance of immigrants in education.
Okay, and Hazel?
Yeah, I think, well, I think we all know at this stage that I seem to shout a lot about how we need to do better by women. So no matter what chance I get, and it's the same here, and it's the same for if I got elected into Seanad, that there's two things we need to look at. We need to look at gender-based violence and prevention of harm towards women. And we then need to look at the other side, which is how do we advance women to make sure that they feel supported and to be able to break that glass ceiling. So the preventative side, like we've had weeks of it beforehand after the tragic killing of Ashling Murphy, of people talking about gender-based violence, of talking about women not being safe. And yet again, that is gone now. So it became another watershed moment that disappeared. And somehow women keep on having to bring that back up. So I think for me, not only do we need to push on women's issues such as gender-based violence, but we need men to come along. So we actually really, like, you have 78% of the dole that is male. So, and as much as they all talked about how gender-based violence was wrong and different policies, then what happened? So I want the Minister of Education to start putting in consent and anti-harassment policies from primary school and secondary school. And that's something we need to push on, and I will push on in the Seanad. And we need to start looking at how best to provide a policy change, a policy shift when it comes to systemic issues of gender-based violence. On the other hand, we need to look at women advancement. So Ryan talked about creche, talked about childcare support there. That is all those are policies I've been pushing for with the Department of Children and Integration. But at the same time, we also need to support women, to tell them that, listen, this is something you should be doing. So if a female leader happens to be running for the Labour Party, and this is no disrespect to my colleagues here, to Ryan here, questioning whether they went to a private school really isn't helpful, because she is a woman that if it would, the other guys who went to private schools and our leaders, no one seemed to care about them. Yet somehow when Mary Lou or when Ivana is putting their head above the parapet and actually running, somehow it's a question about their schooling or a question about their background. I want that to stop. If we want to promote women and if we want to advance women, we need to stop questioning why they are doing it and just say, you're doing it, great. Let us see how we can support you. And that's another systemic change we need in our mindsets.
Ryan, I might give you a right to reply to that.
Yes, I tried to make it quite clear. I wasn't saying this is a reflection of a person's ability as a leader or so, or that they shouldn't run for the Seanad. I did say it was quite interesting that of the left parties, I would consider myself left of centre, but there's 4 left parties, and 2 are led by women, 2 are led by men, and they're all from a certain geographic area and from a certain social background. And what I'm questioning here is we don't seem to have that much diversity in relation to different backgrounds and different experiences. I'm saying this running for Trinity, which is a highly privileged background, a highly privileged electorate, I think we need to question ourselves. And I'm saying this as a Trinity graduate. I went to a public school. I went to university fully relying on the SUSI grant. So I'm not in any way fitting in the general stereotype. But I think I do come from a privileged background as well, in the sense that now I've gone to Trinity and that has provided me with a lot of skills. What I'm questioning in relation to mentioning about these things is we're taking a political class that is very concentrated in Dublin and very concentrated in a certain background. And that's not to say they shouldn't run. I'm just saying, are we doing enough to encourage people from other backgrounds to run? And in relation to women leaders, I would point to the Social Democrats. I'm not affiliated with Social Democrats, but their joint leaders are both women. They're both not privately educated or not. Again, this is not to say this is a reflection of their ability to lead or not, but this is an example like that. You know, I pointed out to some parties. There are other parties that aren't following this trend.
I might just pose a question just to Abbas Ali, just to bring you in on this conversation. You know, do you believe it's relevant if a politician went to a private school or not?
Well, not necessarily private school. Could be any public school and private school. That doesn't matter. All of us should have to be in private school, because all we know, as far as I know, they're all from experience. The political people who the poor people who defends about their right. So I don't think so. The rich people, they're gonna defend about what? Well, they already satisfied and happy. They have everything. So that's just what you heard from the history, from 80s or 60s or 70s. So if I go back, if you could let me go back about the previous question between the women, because I have a problem. How do you hear me now?
I would perfectly, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So about the just small comment here about the women. I think the most important thing is educated. Just saying that's in education. Start educated people from the early stage about the equality, about how people they have a right regardless their gender, male or female. From that point, from the early stage, that will give a lot great result at the end of the education period of time. So sure. I don't find like there is a reason why to keep it as Hazel mentioned, the 70% of the politics people in the Dáil from male. I found that kind of it's not right. I'm not going to say not right, but it's strange. Where's the women? Where's the other half of the population? It should be like at least like 60-40 or 55-45, something closer. Not 70-30. So that's why I'm definitely supporting the women for all sectors. I'm really in that point. I'm encouraging them to participate in all sectors.
Okay, I might just move on to just my final question. I suppose obviously we're all here talking coming from migrant backgrounds. Very simply, I've asked about, you know, what can be done to make women's lives better. So I pose to all of you, what do you think should be done to make the lives of migrants better here in Ireland? And I might start off with Hazel.
I think we need to start from a community base. So one of why I brought up the UN Migration Forum and also intercultural and integration strategy that I drew up with Dublin City Council was we had various working groups with the INAR, with Immigrant Council, getting advice from them on what best to try to implement on a kind of day-to-day level within communities. And it's really important that the state performs their, especially local authorities perform their public sector duty, which is embedded to them now to support migrant and communities in terms of integration and inclusion. So one of the key things we developed in Dublin was having intercultural ambassadors. We found that was very useful, especially in the North Inner City, where the intercultural ambassadors acted not as just translator, but for example, if families wanted to find out where the sports services were, or the education service, or how to apply for SNA, the intercultural ambassadors act as that conduit. And we need more of that, because we found that apart from a language barrier, it's also a skill set and a time. You have many migrants that work 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, so 3 different jobs. They simply do not have the time or the experience or knowledge to go in search of these services. So we need to make it simpler for them. When they migrate into the country, we need to provide proper accommodation and housing, but we also need to provide support services, and that support services should be embedded in each local authority. And that's currently what I'm looking at with Dublin City Council and various other local authorities. There's an overall integration strategy that's happening from the state, and we will be feeding into that. I will be feeding into that. So I think that's really important. And in terms of then future-proofing, we need to look at how communities interact with each other, because you don't want segregation as well. I know when my mum first came over here, so she didn't integrate because she kind of stuck to her own. So like we do that when we go abroad, we flock to what's familiar and we go towards that. And that means that your communities end up being very segregated. And what we want is communities that work better together. So proper community support from housing to library services to emergency services. That's what we need to start planning for. So, thanks. Oh, and the hate crime legislation as well, which will be coming down the road. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Hazel. Am I go to Abbas Ali next?
I believe the first things to do by the government is to keep talking on language. Help the immigrant to learn their language, which is the English language here, by learning the language, the home language here, that make it easier to communicate with the immigrant, easy to understand with their background, easy to understand exactly where they came from. How can you take their background, how they can reflect their traditional or their society here in Ireland. You can take the positive and you can find the positive and negative and try to distinguish between them by to keep talking and talking and talking. That will be definitely going to help the immigrant here to integrate with the society by making seminars. And to be honest, that's one of the things that upset in the minorities when we went to raise the question for the politics people here. We said we never see politics people. They sit with the minorities or to make a seminar or sit down with them or make a webinar or anything like that. Just before the election, we can see them and they say, vote for us. This is my policy. This is what I'm going to do if I elected. So that's why we need more from the government of the politics people to try to be integrated and to try to bring the minorities to make them, to melt them with the society. By this interaction, that's definitely going to lead with the great results. Talking and learning, that's the most equal.
Okay, thank you, Abbas Ali. And Ryan?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was actually today, I was listening to a presentation, a seminar by Dr. Fran McGinnity of the ESRI, where they were just unveiling a report on the experiences of migrant children in education. And one of the things that they mentioned in that report was that the real litmus test for any country in terms of how they integrate migrants is how the second generation performs, okay? So we are a country of quite recent migration by and large. Our immigration flow was increased mainly in the 2000s and after. But a lot of these people, on average, immigrants to Ireland are even higher educated than the average Irish person. So these people are coming with skills and with knowledge that's been acquired in other countries. It's what we do with the people who are acquiring their knowledge and the skills in Ireland that will be an evaluation of how well we're integrating immigrants. And unfortunately, you know, research shows that there are gaps emerging between children from immigrant backgrounds versus the, children from two Irish parent families. And the question is, how do we address this? And where are these gaps emerging the most? And one of the points that was raised in that report, and that has been raised repeatedly, including by my colleagues in Trinity, is that gaps in immigrants are in terms of both integration and in performance in education is strongly associated with socioeconomic background. So if you have financial resources, you can perhaps compensate for weaknesses in other areas and help yourself. But if there are children, for instance, who are coming from a disadvantaged background, they don't have that skills, and we can't let it just, you know, assume that people are going to learn or acquire these skills just in school without extra help, because these schools are geared primarily to the majority population, not necessarily to people with specific needs.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I think that's all the questions for me. I'd like to thank all Ryan and Hazel and Abbas Ali for speaking to me and answering my questions. Maybe some of them were a bit annoying, but I think they were all interesting. I think we've had some interesting debates here. And thank you, of course, to the Immigrant Council for inviting me this evening. And I might just hand back over to Brian.
Thank you very much, Gabby, and thank you to our panelists as well for participating this evening. And Gabby, back to yourself. Thanks for doing a fantastic job moderating, and you threw a few curveballs in there and a few difficult questions to get the conversation going. And it really was really refreshing and really exciting to get to know everybody a little bit better this evening. And I think a very wide-ranging discussion as well. We talked about migration. There was the Seanad and Seanad reform. We talked about the situation in Ukraine and associated with that, Irish neutrality. We talked about gender issues, drug reform, citizens' assemblies. So we covered, you know, quite a lot there in the last kind of almost an hour or so, or maybe a little bit more. So I think that's fantastic. Like, as an organization, this is what we try and do. Is you know, we're a national level organization, and as much as we can, we just want to be a platform. You know, we want to kind of amplify voices, and we want to be a platform for kind of, I suppose, reflecting the reality of Ireland, you know, not pushing forward kind of false representations of Ireland. Ireland is a diverse country. It's not becoming a diverse country. It is a diverse country. And like so many areas, our politics really have to represent that. But I think what the conversation showed this evening is that, you know, people from a migrant background aren't just going to talk about migration. The business of governance is many and varied. There's so many different topics within governance, both in the Seanad and in the Dáil and at local level as well. And that's what we all need to be as engaged citizens, is open to all these conversations and all the issues that come up with it. So I think it's been really fantastic, and we were a cozy group this evening on a Thursday evening. But we will, obviously, the session has been recorded, and we'll put it on our YouTube, and we'll share it across our social media channels. And I hope that those that follow the Immigrant Council will get an opportunity to watch back and get to know the candidates a little bit better, like we did this evening as well. You know, so again, to wish you all the very, very best of luck. I think it's fantastic when people put themselves forward for political life, because as Hazel said, it's definitely not glamorous, and I don't know, I have never gone near it myself, but I know from those I know within it, it's a hard slog and many long hours. So I have tremendous respect for anyone that puts themselves forward for any level of political representation. So I commend you all for that, and we commend you as an organization for that too. So that's it. We will draw it to a close, and again, to thank our three panelists, Ryan, Hazel, and Abbas, and to thank Gabby, our fantastic moderator this evening. It's been really a lovely evening to talk to you, or to watch you talk about these issues. So thank you all very much, and good night, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much.